The extraordinary thing is that David Cameron thought he would get rid of this problem by having a referendum, and he turned a row within the Tory party into a national row. And the more you talk about it in Britain and the more the argument went on, the more the debate continued, the more and more people are deciding they've had enough of the EU. I must say, George, I admire them. I'm absolutely delighted the way they're standing up to the people who rule us in Brussels. And I really wish a few people in Ireland would start listening and looking at what they're doing over there.
Forget about Ireland just for the moment, although I'm not going to forget it in terms of talking to you.
Yeah.
The latest polls are actually suggesting that the Leave It is quite substantially in front.
Well, one of the things that has happened they weren't calculating on was that they reckoned the Labour Party supporters would vote to remain. And by nearly 50%, if not more, the Labour Party supporters are going to vote to leave. And that's not surprising because migration is the huge cause celebre. And it is the working class who are most in contact, who have most argument about that, who are most concerned about it. It's now looking at a significant part. I mean, it's an extraordinary coalition. You have middle class Tories and working class Labour all agreeing that Europe is no longer a good thing.
But Tom, and I'm joined by Tom McGurk, talking. He's a columnist with the Sunday Business Post, of course, and we're talking about the vote next week on Brexit or otherwise. Tom, one of the things you say, the deal with Labour, but I never got now you're closer to it as a columnist. I never got the impression that the Labour Party was fully committed to this. I mean, they didn't seem to campaign, or you never got the impression they were campaigning.
Well, Corbyn is sort of just about done enough and turned up at one or two places. Wouldn't appear with, wouldn't appear with David Cameron. But I don't know whether you saw the debate last week, but the Giselle, I forget her second name, the Labour Party outstanding ex-German lady who come to live in Britain, Member of Parliament, she was absolutely outstanding. She spent many years with the Commission in Brussels, and her knowledge and her small print on it was hugely impressive. George, again, the opinion polls are hard to call because opinion polls with referenda are different to opinion polls with general elections. And they got it so wrong in the general election, expecting a hung parliament, and the Tories got a majority.
But Tom, just before I ask you another question, the point is that migration is a monster problem for Britain. Not illegal migration necessarily, but the fact that there are 27 countries in Europe, all of whom want to come to England. So the problem is that 10, 20 years from now, the British population is set to soar to 85 million.
I couldn't agree more with you, George. I couldn't agree more with you. Migration is the greatest crisis facing the European Union and facing us as well. I mean, Angela Merkel must have taken leave of her senses when she said we have an open door a few months ago, come. And my God, if I was in the back end of Africa with the arse out of my trousers, I'd get up on my bicycle and head for Brussels or Frankfurt or Paris as well. But it's a crazy situation. And one of the most extraordinary things about it is that the failure of the European Union to deal with it illustrates the intrinsic failure of the European Union itself.
Yeah, but what about us? I mean, Britain remains the major trading partner. It's a huge area for Irish people still travel there. We have a huge number of people living there who are ours. Surely we should be thinking the same way as they think, no?
It's a very interesting moment. It's an existential moment for the Irish, George, because we're being asked to make a choice here between London and Brussels. Now, London is far deeper in our emotions and affections and knowledge than ever Brussels was. And if the Brits come out, if this Brits exit, isn't there a case for us to look again at where we stand? Could we be like Norway or Switzerland? Could we have a special deal where we have a relationship with Britain and another relationship with the European Union? After all, it's crazy to think the border for the European Union is going to be a mile down the road in Newry.
But what do you believe will happen at the border and at Heathrow when we're going in if Britain leaves? Are we then going to be in the same line as the people off the Air India flight, or are we going to need a triptych to bring our car across the border like we used to in the past?
Well, it's more complicated than that. All of those born in the Republic before 1948 are entitled to British passports. That was all covered in the Anglo-Irish Treaty with the free passage, and I don't see why there shouldn't continue to be free passage. That's an agreement we made between Dublin and London, and I must say I can't imagine how Brussels would interfere with that. Now, all this talk is going on about what will happen at the border, and there'll be so on and so forth. Quite honestly, George, none of us knows what's going to happen, because this is an entirely different situation for, say, the border from Greece into Macedonia or something. This is an entirely different situation. The area of free travel in the agreement between Britain and Ireland has existed since 1922.
Yeah, but the British now, I think, I've always thought that they were likely, because the thing in Britain is this isn't sort of uneducated, unintelligent people who are voting against it because they think, there'll be a rash of migrants coming in. There are the city of London, huge numbers of people in the city of London are going to vote to leave because they think Europe will damage London as a financial centre.
I have a well-got cousin who is not only a leading member of the Tory party, but actually on the Royal Palaces Committee. Can you imagine, George? And she was in here recently, and she said to us quite seriously, she said, my country's disappearing. And she lives in an extremely expensive and salty part of London. And I thought to myself, if the feeling has risen up that level in the sort of social and economic order, it must be more widespread. George, I think it's going to happen. And, I wonder have we replaced the colonial DNA for the Brits with a sort of colonial DNA for the European Union? Because nobody in this country has a single criticism to make of this situation. And once this is over, we are heading for some sort of federal political Europe. And the European Union has stripped us of democracy. We don't have democracy anymore. We have members of the European Parliament wandering around still trying to find the toilet. The place is absolutely chaotic. It is not a parliament at all. Essentially, Brussels is run by an elite. Mr. Juncker, who elected him? It is run by an elite of civil servants and lobbyists.
But what about us? When we got a huge amount of money in Europe, we got the road to Cork.
And they got all of our fish. And you look at some of the things they've done, absolutely insane. George, why was the sugar factory in Carlow closed? What was that to do? Europe decided they didn't want any more sugar produced, so they closed that sugar factory in Carlow, which hugely affected thousands.
And which everybody now realizes was an incredibly stupid decision.
Absolutely. Then they come out with this decision that is it 60% of our renewable energy must be from renewables? Now that's a great idea if you own a turbine factory for making wind turbines in Sweden or Germany. That was imposed upon us time and time again. For example, 2 weeks ago, the Freedom Party in Austria, which is a right-wing party, almost won the presidency. And Juncker told the Austrians that if the Freedom Party won, Austria would lose its voting powers within the European Union. So I was reading Ron Liddell in the Sunday Times, a very fine journalist, ran the Today Show for years in Britain, and he's voting for Brit exit, and he says something extraordinary. He says, the European Union is now becoming like the old Soviet Union. That you don't know who is running the place, you can't change it, you can't vote for anybody, and it's an elite. Look at the way they treated Greece. Look at what was shoveled out on the Greeks. Look at the warning and threatening was made to Greek democracy. Look what they did to us. I'll never forget the press conference when the when the three gentlemen arrived in Dublin. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And I'd never forget the European Union person running the press conference who said, I want all your questions first and then we'll answer them all together.
But
That's smacks of Europe.
Yeah, but we might not be where we are today if we were not members of the European community.
I couldn't agree more. But let's take it and run, Georgie. Let's take it and run. Look where we are now. How much more have they to offer us? That's the question.
The biggest market in the world.
Yeah, but why should we be cut out of that market? George, I walk into the shops and buy things from China. I buy things from America. They're not in the European Union. You don't have to be in the EU to trade with the EU. And anyway, at the end of the day, trade is about a person A wanting to sell something to a person B. That's what trade is about. All of this stuff has been erected to in the middle of the argument, and they've adopted the same tactic as they adopted in Scotland. They're frightening people. I mean, imagine Sunday morning, out came David, your Prime Minister, saying, the pensions are going to be affected. In a few years' time, you might lose your pension, said Cameron. What an extraordinary thing to say to people.
But what about Cameron? He cannot stay if they lose.
I don't think he can stay if they win. I think the Tory party is now so bitterly divided. He has something like 100 members of Parliament who want out of the European Union, who might decide to sack him.
But the British, Tom, go right back to the very beginning. The British were never fully committed. That's why they didn't change sterling. Like, we were good boys. We voted the way they wanted us to do. We took the euro more than any other country in Europe. We accepted the currency. We were really good boys.
But we had a bunch of civil servants who couldn't believe, the quality of the water out in Brussels and the pensions and the elite and the jobs and the earnings and the money and the size of the European Parliament. I mean, the European Union, George, has a massive bureaucracy and people earn huge amounts of money. It's a real honeypot, I tell you. So why would the ruling class want to get rid of that?
But what we would then have to do is we'd have to link the punt to sterling if we left as well. That might necessarily be a bad thing.
Perhaps not. But, George, look, this is the question. At the end of the day, what means more to us, given all our history and all of our culture and all of our trade and all of our experience, what means more to us, London or Brussels? It's a fascinating question. And my instinct is that it's London.
All right. Well, it'll certainly, I think now, the way it'll require a sea change, I suspect, for this referendum to win, because the momentum is heading towards leave, isn't it?
Yeah,
do you think?
It is. I mean, there is a theory that Downing Street are concerned that they won't get the stay-in voters out, the Remain voters out. So they're sort of frightening them by saying how far in front the Leave vote is, to frighten them out. But I mean, that is they're and they seem to have run out of arguments. I watch a lot of it on television. I've been watching some of the audiences and so on and so forth. And the BBC and ITV go to enormous trouble to try and fill these type of audiences. So they break down exactly between Remain and Leave. And I have seen no evidence of any passion for Remain.
All right.
None whatsoever.